Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Friday, May 30th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's choosing to join us here today. Whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet, and it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also go to that web page and download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one. In which people have been stepped through that worksheet process. So if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and if you choose to do that, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Drag-on Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show. And then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. We had our support group last night, and somebody did a worksheet and got some rather significant shift from an 8 out of 10 upset down to about a 3, and found some insights during that process that led to outlining at least 3 other worksheets that that person can do moving forward. And we also watched about half of a talk from Guy Finley. Guy Finley does his what they're now calling classic talks on Wednesday evening. And those talks used to be accumulated and available for watching or listening to free at guyfinley.org/channel. And I believe that fairly recently, within the last month, they quit posting those Wednesday talks on that channel, and yet they seem to be available, like this last one was published live on YouTube. So if you follow Guy Finley on YouTube, you can scroll back through their posts and get access to the entire video. Because he got a little bit inspired, he took a sidebar that took him almost 15 minutes. So instead of being an hour-long talk, as they usually are, that's what he plans for, this was about an hour and 15 minutes. And we only listened to about 30 to 45 minutes of it, and then had some discussion. So I just I have to acknowledge that the people who attend those support groups are delightful, and we get a lot out of it. We get a lot out of the interchange, and it's completely free and accessible through Zoom on Tuesday and Thursdays, most Tuesdays and Thursdays, from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. So if you're so inclined, join us. And or if you're so inclined, pass that information along to somebody else. All the information you need to join us absolutely free is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. And there's a separate information page for the Tuesday and a separate one for the Thursday show. So the other thing that we've been doing is we've been reading from Christian Sundberg's book, A Walk in the Physical. And this most recent theme of essays I've been reading from is titled, You Are Already There. And the essay I'm going to read next is titled, The Ubiquitous Presence of Life. When something is ubiquitous, it means it's everywhere. And Christian writes in this very brief essay, life is always present in everything. And he writes, because life, in parentheses, he writes, which is synonymous with awareness or spirit or consciousness, life is always present in every experience. Now, you wouldn't think somebody needs to tell that to us, but we get so busy, we get so focused on doing rather than being, that we literally forget to be aware that we are a miracle of life, that we as human beings are miraculous just because we have consciousness, just because we have physical form, just because we can get up and walk across the room. In some of the early lectures from Dr. Michael Ryce, I remember I think there were several different lectures where he would make this point, and he would say, who can explain to me how to get up out of your chair and walk across the room? Now, everybody knows how to do that. Okay, well, then who can explain it to me? And people make various attempts, and Dr. Rice says, you're missing all kinds of things that have to happen that are happening, and you don't know how they happen. You don't know which brain cells to fire which nerves in which sequence to counterbalance the movement when the muscles start to flex to keep your weight over your center of gravity. You don't know any of that. You just think about it and it happens. It's a miracle that we're here at all. It's a miracle that we can do anything. And we just get so used to seeing people walk and throw a ball and ride a bike and drive a car and, you know, climb that we just think it's normal everyday stuff and there's nothing to it unless or until it gets taken away. I was just listening to a book this morning by a young man basically at the top of life, as you would think, about 25 years old, and an athlete and a web designer and a business owner and an Air Force officer. And I mean, just had all this stuff going for him. And then somebody pulls out in front of him when he's driving his motorcycle and he almost dies and he's in a coma for a month and he's in the hospital for over 2 months and he has to relearn to walk and he's completely blind from the head injury. And, you know, there are very few things in this world that'll make you start appreciating the normal everyday things. Very few things that'll help you appreciate them better than having them taken away. Life is everywhere. Life is a miracle. You're a part of life. You're a miracle. And yet we get so busy, we get so conditioned into focusing on the intellectual processing, basically from the frontal lobes of our brain, that we miss this. And so this essay is saying life is ubiquitously present. It's always there in everything. No experience can occur without an awareness of it. Life is consciousness, is awareness, is spirit. Life is present for everything ever experienced. You are living awareness. And as your awareness is part of what he calls, quote, the sea of awareness, S-E-A, sea of awareness, close quotes, that means you're connected to everything, everywhere. The Way of Mastery tells us you think a thought and it affects the farthest stars. Every choice you make has ripple effects. Christian writes, how can you be alone when everywhere you go, everything you see, and everyone you meet is life? How can you be alone when the you that sees things is the same as the you that is connected to all things, that is all things? This is the point that Way of Mastery makes when it says all minds are joined. There is no such thing as privacy. You have this idea that you have private thoughts and private actions, and at a different level, everything is connected. All minds are joined. It's a whole different level of scale, obviously, than the physical body. You're at the level of the physical senses. Somebody walks out of a room and gets on a plane and flies away to the other side of the country, and you feel very, very disconnected from them because you're used to having them there with you, that you can see them and smell them and touch them, and now they're not there. So at that level of scale, yes, there is this thing that we call separation at the physical level. But everything about this book and this reading is trying to help us tune into observing whatever our extra senses, other than the five senses, might tell us about our connection to everyone and everything at all times. So the last little paragraph in this essay reads, There is no content that can occur within life that can separate you from life. There is no experience of distance, no experience of pain, no experience of loss that can truly separate you from what you really are. All things are made of life, capital L, life. And you are life, capital L, life, consciousness. So remember earlier in this little essay, he says, life is synonymous with awareness, spirit, consciousness, all that is, etc. There is no experience that can separate you from the flow of life. There is no experience of distance, no experience of pain, no experience of loss that can truly separate you from what you really are. All things are made of this stuff we call life, and you are life. So you might want to ask yourself, how can you ever be absent from its care, from its compassion, from its loving energy, from its connection? And then you might want to wake up to the fact that everything about feeling alone, feeling lonely, feeling sad is an internal creation of yours. It's an experience that you're having because you pour your mind energy into thoughts of separation. It's not what he would call in this work fundamentally true about you or about life. So again, the theme that we're reading these essays from in this particular grouping of essays, the theme is titled, You Are Already There. And the sixth and final essay in that group is titled, The Peace, P-E-A-C-E, the peace of non-seeking. And again, the tie into the way of mastery. It frequently tells us throughout the way of mastery, we must choose to be one who has found. We must choose to give up seeking, especially outside of ourselves, and choose to be one who has found what? Found the truth of your nature, the truth of your connection to the one mind and all that is. So here's an essay that says, Christian writes, the very act of seeking itself can become something that moves you away from peace. In a sense, in wanting something, we're actually moving away from peace because, or we're moving away from the thing we want because pursuing it is often done in service of the idea that we lack it in the first place. So it's in the way of mastery. It's in Course in Miracles. It's in this work by Christian Sundberg. Guy Finley talks about in one of his lectures, he says very clearly, when you strike out trying to achieve, to acquire something that's of true value in your life, enlightenment, connection to all things, etc. When you take a movement to try and acquire that, you create the roadblocks to your ever achieving it. Why is that? Well, because as the way of mastery points out, you're like a person who has been given possession of a most precious gem, and you recognize its value, and you hide it in one of the many pockets in your coats and cloaks and bags. And then eventually you forget that you have it stashed in one of your pockets, and you look in a pocket or two and you don't seem to find it. And then you go searching everywhere, the pockets of everyone you meet. And so you're voraciously hungry for the discovery of where this thing is. And it's right there with you. It's as the Way of Mastery says in a number of different places, this mystery that is closer to you than your own breath. And it's there waiting your discovery. It's like the gem you've stashed in one of the many pockets you have, and then you forgot that you have it. So you go looking and searching through everybody else's pockets. As soon as you start looking for it outside of yourself, you build the obstructions that will prevent you from ever realizing that you already have it. So Christian writes, the very act of seeking itself can move you away from peace. In a sense, in wanting something, we're actually moving away from it because pursuing it is often done in service of the idea that we lack whatever it is in the first place. In trying to become rich, we become poor. In trying to become free, we lose sight of the freedom we already have. In trying to become spiritually enlightened, we can become self-centered. Pursuing something to satiate a need is ultimately empty. All things are already present right now. There is no place we truly need to go. There is no thing we truly need to do. We've talked about this a number of times, and there's a lesson in Way of Mastery that says you need do nothing. Christian writes, there is no object we truly need. No reconfiguring of the play is actually necessary. In knowing that fully, there is peace. The peace comes from knowing that you're already whole and complete just as you are. The peace comes from the deep realization that there's nothing of value that can be added unto you and nothing of true value that can be taken from you. And again, I'll repeat that we've been having these support group meetings for so long that eventually it happens that lesson comes up either from Guy Finley or The Way of Mastery or a book like this, and it will coincide with someone in the group having just lost. I mean, one particular situation that comes to mind is that message came up in our support group about 3 or 4 months after I had been ripped off for $30,000 in a business deal. And another member in the group, I believe the figure she was talking about is somebody owed her $75,000 and wasn't paying up. Basically had ripped her off for $75,000. She'd done all the work for it and they were refusing to pay her. They'd collected the money from the work she'd done and they weren't passing it along to her. And so she said, see, I know this lesson's bonus and bogus and wrong because they really are ripping me off for all this money. And I just had to refine the wording just a little bit. Instead of saying there's nothing that can be taken from you, nothing of value. Well, my money's valuable, and I had to change it to say there's nothing of true, essential value that can be taken from you, and nothing of true value that can be added unto you, because in essence, when you have awareness, when you have life, which is consciousness, that's whole and complete all by itself. And all of these other things that we accumulate, everything else, including the body and every possession we ever accumulate, whatever arises in time ends in time. So it's not going with me when I drop the body. And therefore, it wasn't real at the same level of scale that my consciousness is real. When you know your true nature, there is peace, and there's no seeking for anything else. Christian writes, in hearing this, we may decide to even reject seeking itself. And in parentheses, he says, a new thing to pursue or a new thing to reject, close parentheses. But rejection is not the way. The way transcends and yet can arise within all objects, within all paths, and within all searches. That truth is actually not an abstract or faraway thing. Rather, that truth is the closest thing to us. We simply need to be what we are. We simply need to become awake to the fact that we are part of this flow of life and that our consciousness is part of the creative force. And we are given dominion over where we point that consciousness. Do we point it towards fear, anger, hurt, confusion, or do we point it towards the awareness
I'm
of our true
wondering
nature? Is this
if
Sally?
there's somebody. Oh, so sorry. So sorry.
So apparently Sally was accidentally unmuted. So the path to peace, as he's talking about in this essay, is the awareness of your true nature. Not thinking about it, but breathing into it and experiencing it. The last thing he says in this little paragraph is be. Just be. Breathe, soften, experience life and the flow of life in, through, as, and around you in this moment. You are, and that is enough. You exist, and that is enough. As Michael Rice would say, you have the value that matches the value any person has ever had, not because of your accomplishments, not because of what you might do for somebody, but simply because the Creator put the breath of life in you. So Christian writes, be today. Be here and give the world the gift of your attention, the gift of your full, alert presence, with no seeking required. Guy Finley frequently in his talks will say things like, come awake, take a breath, breathe. Your brain needs the food, the oxygen. Bring your awareness, keep your attention, bring it back to this moment. So that's the end of that essay, and I'm as I let the book move forward, just one page, it goes into lesson 3. And so rather than go back and try and figure out, is there potentially one of the 160 essays that I missed, I'm going to just move forward. And there are annotations back to those 160 essays all through the next part of the book, part 3. And part 3 is titled Questions and Answers. And Christian writes here as an introduction, what follows is a series of informal responses to a variety of spiritual questions, many of them appearing exactly as originally asked by fellow seekers. The responses are organized by topic. And before we proceed, he says, I would like to reiterate the following 2 disclaimers. The first one is, words cannot possibly speak successfully to the nature of many of these questions. So the kinds of things we're talking about, as I say so often in all of this work, whether it's in the support groups or on the internet show or in my own work with patients, is what we're talking about goes beyond words, each new heartbeat. So please don't think that when I say a certain word or a pattern of words in a sentence or a paragraph, I've captured the essence of what we're talking about. I'm just pointing in the direction. And if people are willing to move themselves in that direction, they might usher themselves into an experience that's radically enlightening. The second disclaimer he puts here is, and I'll just read it as he writes it, I am a fool, and I certainly do not claim to have all the answers. Far, far from it. I am a flawed and largely ignorant student of life. I am also learning and changing my understanding every day, as we all are. And yet he writes, still, fools can help fools. So I present this content just for consideration in the hopes that it may be of assistance to someone. And again, that message is all the way through the Way of Mastery. I don't know what anything is or is for. I don't know what any of my brothers and sisters need. I need only recognize my divine ignorance, and that puts me in the place of openness, allowance, and surrender, from which place I can learn, I can be taught by life. So please remember, we're entering a section of the book, the third section of his book, titled A Walk in the Physical. And the third section is titled Questions and Answers. So please remember, we in this internet show welcome your comments and questions, even if I seem to be in the middle of reading something. So if something that's happening already happened in the last essay or a couple of essays I read, or anything that comes up for you as you're listening to me reading these questions and answers, please speak up. Or if you don't want to speak up live on this little Zoom call, send me an email. So here's the first question in the list under the category of purpose. What is the purpose of human life? And Christian writes, we come for the expansion of love and joy through the process of integrating experience. We enter the world of form so that we can be something specific rather than we are in the formless, and we can see how we can better express and expand our true, loving, and creative nature in and through that context, whatever my context happens to be. And the context of being human offers a very specialized and unique opportunity. And every little variation about our humanness offers another level of unique experience and opportunity. I was just talking about listening to a book of a young man I will probably interview in early July, who was 25 years old and essentially at the top of the world in terms of accomplishments and vitality and skills. And then he almost dies in a car accident and loses his sight permanently and has to relearn how to walk. All of these things. And he's chosen to view it as an opportunity. He's chosen to view it as a growth opportunity. That's what this first question and answer says. Everything about us coming into the physical is for the purpose of the expansion of love and joy through the integration of experience. And we enter this world of form so that we can have a specific experience that we can't have when we're just in the non-physical realm. The next question he offers is, why was our universe created? And Christian writes, Our universe was created to facilitate the expansion of beingness through creation and to facilitate the expansion of joy and love. Sojourns into duality and form enable the individual and the collective to expand incredibly. Put another way, the fundamental truth of capital L love is even more deeply known and can be even more powerfully actualized when we actually engage ourselves into these challenging constraint sets. He talks a lot about challenging constraint sets, difficult constraint sets. What do we mean by a constraint set? Well, once I enter the physical and take form in a body, there's only so far I can run without falling over in exhaustion. There's only so high I can jump. There's only so many octaves I can express through my vocal cords. There's only so much weight I can lift. Each of these are constraints. The laws of gravity, all of the laws of Newtonian physics, all of these create restrictions or constraints on what I can do and how I can express myself. Christian goes on here and writes, the bigger the vibrational distance, and this is in quotes, vibrational distance, close quotes, the bigger the vibrational distance from our source with a capital S that we can go, and then still integrate whatever experience we have, the more expansion can occur. And the more that gets added to the eternal joy. The physical universe is an environment that was created to fulfill that purpose. So the physical universe was created just to be creation expanding. I just flashed on a time when I was riding my bicycle down the bike path years ago, listening to a Guy Finley talk, and he was talking about how, you know, that there was light before there were eyeballs to see the light. And that our eyeballs evolved so that we could have the experience of the light and colors and form. And he was just talking about this interconnection of everything that has arisen, that's been created, and how it expands as just a natural part of the flow of life. So the next question he was asked is, if we are spirit and our earthly lives are just some kind of game or play, then does that mean that our earthly lives don't matter? And this is the kind of question we get a lot, right? This is the kind of question that, I mean, I have, for decades now, I've listened to people argue about how you need to have religion and you need to have God and you need to have all these concepts of right and wrong and good and bad, and you need shame and guilt to get people to be able to live together. Otherwise, all of these animalistic, violent, guttural impulses would make it impossible for us to survive. And so that's just an example of how the dualistic, the black, white, on, off, all or none thinking that we've been programmed into expresses itself when it comes into a question like this. If we're spirit and our earthly lives are just some kind of a game or play, then does it mean our earthly lives don't matter? And over and over again in the support groups over the years and occasionally on the internet show, We'll have a conversation about how everything is acceptable, all events are neutral, etc. And people will get very agitated and say, oh, so it doesn't matter if I blow you away with a shotgun or et cetera, et cetera. And none of that's being said, but it's an example of how the mind that's been programmed into this all or nothing categorical black, white, polar opposite sets of meanings jumps at trying to justify its position. And it justifies its being right by defining what's wrong, what's the opposite. So here's his answer. Firmly with an exclamation mark, no. It does not mean that our lives don't matter. He writes, our earthly experiences and relationships are extremely valuable indeed. Just because the ultimate reality transcends the earthly experience doesn't mean the earthly experience is unimportant. In fact, everything we do here is very important. Well, if you just said all events are neutral and you need do nothing, then the way the mind has been trained, the conscious logical mind has been trained, it starts to set up these logical, seemingly logical arguments that say, no, you're wrong. If it's a value, then you got to have anger and you've got to have pushing away and you've got to have resistance and you can't go with the flow. But that's only if you buy into those fundamental assumptions from that logical framework, or that logical framework is based on. One of the examples of this, I'm not sure I can give good voice to it, but it's coming to me very strongly, is someone was talking about, very bright minds were talking about, well, what about this from the Bible that says that homosexuality is an abomination? And what about if you let transgender people participate in sports of their newly assigned gender, how unfair it is, et cetera, et cetera. And the very bright minds that were talking about this, that refused, it might have been Neil deGrasse Tyson might have been one of the people on the panel, but these very bright minds refused to buy into this, it's all or nothing, and said, what if everything about our culture moving to be able to accept trans individuals, people who are born with this really strong sense that the body they're living in is not the one that they're supposed to be in, that their gender is supposed to be either fluid or the opposite of the male-female dichotomy, etc. And what if our challenge is not to stay in this, well, we've only got these two genders and we have to let them only compete with, and we just start saying, well, wait, what if we just flex it a bit and say, okay, so we're not isolating people based on their gender into all of these people with this kind of genitalia get to do this sport together and all of the people with this kind of genitalia get to do that sport together. What if we just create different categories that are based on size and strength and reflexes, and we've had to do that over and over again for different things over the years, as whether it was in business settings or it was in sports settings. And it used to be that we had a situation when I was in high school, and they had these very awkward weight categories for wrestling, and it was bizarre because over the decades, people got bigger and heavier. So these categories had been in place for decades, and like the highest category cutoff was like 190 pounds, right? So there's maybe 180 and then 190, I forget exactly, but like 190 or 195 was the cutoff for heavyweight. And what that meant is everybody over 195 pounds had to compete with everybody else over 195 pounds. Well, when the highest level weight of people wrestling was like 190, 195, 200, that was no big deal. Because then they were just like everybody else in these smaller categories. You got the 132 to 138 category. You've got the 139 to 145 category. So everybody's wrestling with somebody who is at least within a 10-pound weight differential. Unless you got to the heavyweight. And then this literally happened to me. I was about 190 pounds, 195 pounds, and I had to wrestle a 350-pound person. It was ridiculous. He flattened me like a pancake. And they recognized that. Over time, kids kept getting bigger, and they said, we need the heavyweight, and then we need the super weight, and we need the Mongol Goliath weight. And so they started creating other categories. So these brilliant minds were saying, listen, what if it's not just about you either let everybody who's transitioned to a different gender participate wherever they want, and then obviously it creates some physical advantages, or we just restructure how we put these people together, and it's not just based on what area genitalia, it's based on size and strength, et cetera, et cetera. That's the kind of thing here. It's not just all or nothing. Either everything is okay and therefore our lives are meaningless. It's and here's just one example of how there might be meaning to our lives. What if the meaning in our lives isn't about how much money we accumulate? It's not even about how much money that we spend to help the homeless. It's about the extension of the creative energy. It's about the extension of the loving energy, which is expansive and creative, as opposed to the extension of the fearful energy, which is contracting and restricting. And it's like the old observation, what has hate ever created? Nothing. What has love created? Everything. So the value of your life, you get to create your own value, your own meaning for life. That's in the Course in Miracles very explicitly. But the value can also be beyond what your thoughts can track. And you have value just because you're here with the breath of life in you. And that's what some people believe. And not everybody believes that. How do I know that? Because we routinely find people who dehumanize others just based on the color of their skin or where they were born or what God they say they worship, etc. So not everybody agrees on what the purpose of life is. And remember, as we were beginning these Q&As, Christian says, words can't possibly, that's first disclaimer, words can't possibly contain all we're talking about. And the second disclaimer is, Christian says, I'm a fool, and I certainly do not claim to have all the answers. I'm just a flawed and largely ignorant student of life. So take this with a grain of salt, or put it in your own hopper of intellectual evaluations and just add it to the database to see what you might come up with. You might come up with an entirely different meaning for being here than anything you've ever read in any kind of spiritual book or any kind of philosophical teaching or any kind of a science perspective. You, whoever you are listening to this now, if you open to possibility rather than fighting for a belief, which is some thought that's been pre-programmed into your mind by your past and your culture and your language, etc. His answer is, our lives are very valuable. Everything we do here is very important, just probably not in the ways we are thinking about them. And maybe from different levels of scale There's value in just extending compassion. There's value in just adding your particular flavor of artistic ability to whatever little realm you get to express it in. This, for instance, this Sunday, I'm going to a little, and I do mean a little, live musical event. And the last few times I've been to these, there've been 8 or 10 people there in total. Yeah, that means only 6 or 8 people are there as truly just audience members. And yet it's a spreading of original songs, loving intent, wonderful rhythms, exchange of funds. Sometimes people donate money to keep this thing going. And it's a life-giving exchange of energies, but it's only affecting, as my physical eyes and ears would tell me, it's only affecting 10 or 15 people at the most. But what we understand from this work is that everything ripples out from there. And so those 10 or 15 people who go to that music event and they're inspired to be more loving, or they're inspired to go home and beat on the drums for themselves and start playing the drums again, or maybe picking up a guitar, or maybe writing a poem, and then there's the ripple effect from that goes way beyond any human mind's ability to track. So yes, we have value, and you need do nothing, and everything is okay. That everything you experience is the flow of life. And as Michael Singer would call us to learn to prefer everything. Or as Einstein would call us to be aware that when we create a special affection for certain people and situations and things closest to us, we create a prison for ourselves. And the only way out of that prison is to extend that special affection. There's nothing wrong with that special affection. Just extend it everywhere. Extend it to everyone you meet and all of creation. That's the only way out of the prison that you create when you think only certain people are worthy of your affection or your appreciation. So the next question in this list, since nobody's raising a hand, I've got about 5 minutes left. I'll read the next question. You say that we're here to integrate experience. What does that mean? And Christian writes, to integrate an experience is to fully know it and assimilate it into what one is, so that one fully, quote, gets it, close quotes, at a being level, not an intellectual level, not that you can write a paragraph about it, but that you feel it fully. He writes, when an experience is fully integrated, it no longer prompts fear. He writes, an integrated experience is one in which the individual can comfortably say with familiarity, quote, oh yeah, I've been there, I've done that, close quotes. Now, there's quite a bit more in that essay on what does it mean to integrate experience. But because of the time here, I'm just going to say Guy Finley has a wonderful story, to my eye and ear. It's a wonderful story about a reporter who goes to the opening of the world's greatest, biggest, scariest roller coaster. And he goes with his notepad and he's there to cover the opening. And he sees all these people in their excited, agitated states, waiting in line, wondering how bad it's going to be, how scared I'm going to get. But he notices this one young woman who's there right in line with everybody else, but she's very calm. And so they get on the ride, and just so happens that they're placed in one car. She's right in front of him, and he's right behind her, and he's off a little to the side so he can see her reactions. And this roller coaster is the biggest, scariest, fastest, flip around most kind of roller coaster ever constructed. And he notices that through the entire ride, even though he's screaming from time to time, she's absolutely calm. So when the ride's over, and some people are swearing they'll never get on another roller coaster again, and others are racing to get in line to ride it again, he notices that she's just calmly walking away. So he's a reporter, and he goes over and says, "Listen, I've got to know, how did you stay so calm through that?" And her answer was, "Look, it's no magic. The fact of the matter is, my dad designed this thing, so I know it's safe. And because my dad designed it, I've been test riding it for months now. So I've been through every whip, every speed up and down, every flip around, and I just know that it's going to be okay. So I just go on it to enjoy it, but it doesn't any longer produce fear in me." That would be a story about her fully integrating the experience of being on the world's largest, fastest, scariest roller coaster. That's what I believe Christian is trying to communicate when he talks about integrating an experience, recognizing that I can have this experience and I don't have to be afraid of the outcome. Whatever the outcome is, it's going to be okay. And I frequently have this with people. I literally had this last night as I was going to bed, about 10:30 after the group. I had a thought of a woman that I have worked with for years. It's a brilliant woman, one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. And yet she continually generates fear about life events, how things are going to work out. What if they what if they don't get better? What if another bad thing happens, etc. And I was having the thought last night going to bed of sending her some kind of a message about, I ache for the day when you, when she, when all of us wake up and realize there's nothing that we really need to generate fear about. When that happens, we will have fully integrated all of the experiences that we used to use to generate fear. So I thank you all for being here. It's a Friday. There's a weekend. We'll be back on Monday. I believe Michael and Jeanie will be back live on Monday. Today it should be a replay of a show on Podbean. If you used to use Spotify to find our podcast, that has been fixed, but the Amazon Music and iHeartRadio are still in process of being fixed. So thank you for being here, for listening and tapping into the archives. We come from love. We're made of love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings. Thanks for being here.